Hey everyone, we're going to get started in just a few minutes. And as a reminder, you don't have to put your name in the chat box. We have a list already on the back end of the webinar. For those that are joining, we'll get started in about 2 minutes. And again, you don't have to put your name in the chat box. We will have that at the end of the webinar. It'll be on the back end, so you won't have to sign in. All right, guys, it is 6 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started. So just wanted to say thank you all for joining us tonight in conjunction with Human Trafficking Awareness Month. This online panel event will feature stories of human trafficking victims as well as local professionals working to combat human trafficking in New Orleans. So the Junior League of New Orleans is an organization of women committed to promoting volunteerism, developing the potential of women, and improving communities through the effective action and leadership of trained volunteers. So the ABOLISH movement was founded in 2014 by the Junior League of Tampa to unite Tampa organizations and agencies in drawing attention to the problem of child sex slavery in the Tampa Bay area. In 2017, the Association of Junior Leagues International adopted ABOLISH as an association-wide initiative to scale the movement and unite communities across the United States and beyond in an effort to generate greater awareness of the intractable systematic issue of child sex slavery. Junior League of New Orleans is committed to raising awareness, providing support, and putting an end to this heinous crime. So tonight would not have been possible without the generous support of Women United. This is a group of 70,000 women worldwide who have invested $3 million into the local community. They focus their efforts of eradicating poverty through policy, philanthropy, and programming. So here with us tonight is Dr. Toya Barnes-Teamer. Dr. Barnes-Teamer is the chairwoman of Women United. She's been engaged with United Way of Southeast Louisiana since the 80s. Dr. Toya is committed to serving her beloved city and the state. She is passionate about the mission of United Way and its commitment to eradicating poverty for women and children through equality in education, healthcare, and economic prosperity. She's going to tell us a little bit more about Women United.
Thank you so much, Michelle. And it's great to see everyone via our Zoom meeting for this webinar. As was mentioned, I am the Women United chairperson. And like United Way, Women United fights for the health, education, and financial stability of every person in every community that we serve. Of course, advocacy and philanthropy are at the heart of Women United. The group actually pools our time, our talent, and financial resources for its members to bring to the forefront the positive impact which women can have on our community. Members' dues and donations fund community grants, such as the work that we're doing with the Junior League, and that this is actually a part of the, helping to serve our most vulnerable women and children in our community. Since 2002, Women United has invested and led the allocation of the $3 million that was mentioned by Michelle. We just want to share too that if there's anyone who is interested in joining us in our efforts, please reach out to Michelle Dunnick and at michelledunnick@unitedwaycela.org. The other thing is we will be sponsoring an event tomorrow night where women will be coming together. And if any of you are interested, we can actually put that information in the chat and hopefully we will see you all tomorrow. And then finally, I want to share that personally, I do a lot of work with HEAL, which is an organization that also serves this population. And I just want to say that this is such important work. And I just want to commend the Junior League for this initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Toya Barnes-Teamer, for being with us tonight and supporting the ABOLISH Committee and Junior League of New Orleans. So tonight we have 4 incredible women joining us to talk about human trafficking. Before I introduce tonight's speakers, we will leave time for Q&A following the discussion. We ask that you use the chat box to ask any questions you may have at that time. This will be recorded and shared with everyone after the session. So first off, we have Sherry Lockridge, who is the Human Trafficking Team Leader at Covenant House, New Orleans. As a former Covenant House resident, 28 years ago, Sherry Lockridge first returned as a volunteer 10 years ago, but she was quickly hired as a resident advisor in the crisis department. Today, Sherry leads Covenant House's anti-trafficking efforts as the Human Trafficking Team Leader, survivor advocate, providing support to more than 300 human trafficking victims over the past several years. Sherry works with support from local, state, and federal law enforcement to identify cases of human trafficking. She is trained in child forensic interviews through the American Professional Society on the abuse of children. In 2017, Sherry participated in a year-long undercover investigation called The Track. Recently, she attended the Supporting LGBTQ Youth Certificate Program at Georgetown University and was admitted to the CJJR Fellows Network in March 2019. She continues to share her knowledge of human trafficking throughout the New Orleans area, presenting to health and human service professionals, law enforcement, and community organizations. Thank you, Sherry, for being here with us tonight. We also have Jennifer Best. She received an MA in psychology, counseling at the New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary. She has extensive training and experience in trauma counseling and crisis intervention, and has spent her time working in private and nonprofit counseling centers. She is a professor at Lavelle College in New Orleans, where she teaches the Introduction to Psychology and Marriage and Family Issues. Her responsibilities at Eden House include developing individualized care plans with their residents and in-house meetings and support groups, and leading prevention programs. She completed training as a prevention education facilitator through My Life, My Choice in Boston. We also have with us tonight Catherine Dunn, who is a survivor expert that provides leadership to Eden House, as well as other anti-trafficking organizations, including the Modern Day Slavery Research Project conducted by Dr. Laura Murphy. She's an engaging public speaker who educates audiences about the risk of human trafficking in the United States. Her specialty is working with those in communities with which she most identifies, namely youth, LGBTQ, and those affected by the juvenile justice system. She is a graduate of Eden House in New Orleans, a longtime residential program for survivors of human trafficking. She collaborates with Eden House in part of their prevention program and provides resident support for current residences. And then we also have Jennifer Ray, who is our moderator for tonight. She is with New Orleans Trafficking Task Force Coordinator. Jennifer formerly held the anti-human trafficking coordinator position at the Florida Department of Health. Jennifer values collaboration and believes that expanding the engagement of multidisciplinary actors will strengthen the response to human trafficking. Jennifer is a Floridian who can claim roots in the Latin community of Tampa, Florida. Jennifer received her master's degree in applied anthropology from the University of South Florida, Louisiana home. Thank you again, ladies, for joining us. And I am going to turn it over to Jennifer now.
Thank you so much. Well, welcome. It's so great to see you here today. Really quick, I want to give you some background on the task force. The purpose of the task force is to provide seamless collaboration between law enforcement, prosecutors, and victim service providers. We are victim-centered and trauma-informed. To help reach this mission, the task force participates in outreach and training events on anti-human trafficking topics like this panel. Panel discussions like tonight's Survivor Stories provides a chance for community members to engage with survivors and allies in the anti-trafficking field and hear their perspective and insight on an effective human trafficking response. We greatly appreciate the Junior League, Abolish Movement for leading the community in this conversation. And once again, we really appreciate you being with us tonight. Before I hand it over to the panelists, I want to mention two more things. First, as stated earlier, January is National Human Trafficking Prevention Month. Notably, every year since 2010, the President has dedicated the month to raise awareness about human trafficking and to educate the public about how to identify and prevent this crime. The state of Louisiana also recognizes National Human Trafficking Prevention Month. And for reference, I'm going to define human trafficking. The federal definition for the criminal act of sex trafficking is the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, obtaining, patronizing, or soliciting of a person for the purpose of a commercial sex act, in which the commercial sex act is induced by force, fraud, or coercion, or in which that person induced to perform such an act has not reached 18 years of age. And the federal definition for labor trafficking is the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, or obtaining of a person for labor or services through the use of force, fraud, or coercion for the purpose of subjugation to involuntary servitude, peonage, debt bondage, or slavery. Please note that Louisiana state law has a departure to the federal definition for sex trafficking. in which the use of force, fraud, or coercion for the purpose of a commercial sex act doesn't have to be proven for individuals that haven't reached the age of 20 years. I will now hand it over to the panelists. I will start by asking a series of questions of Sherry and Catherine. Then we'll move to a panel discussion. To Jennifer Best, who I'll ask a series of questions of as well. So let's get started with the first question. And Sherry, I'll hand over to you. What would you like for us to know about your story?
Hi, Jennifer. Hi, everybody. The most important thing that I'd like people to know regarding my story would be that I am a former Covenant House resident. I came from a very abusive family, physically, emotionally, sexually, and was removed and placed into the foster care system, where I became a chronic runaway by age 12. Because I was a chronic runaway, I wound up going from group home to foster home, school to school, if I went to school at all, at times. And I found myself in some very precarious situations at a very young age. Often feeling like, when I was 13, I remember feeling like I was already 30, an adult, and I could take care of myself. But my chronic runaway, just being in the system and coming from that very dysfunctional, abusive home, led me to be also naive and looking for love and looking for that father bond that would be healthier than what I was given. And so it led to me believing in a man who brought me on the Airline Highway Strip, because that was the strip back then. And within 30 minutes, being with the first John, luckily was able to get myself out of that situation by being just as manipulative as he was, earning his trust. And after several weeks, able to get on a bus where I went, and still being a runaway from foster care, wound up in an abandoned parking garage right here on Rampart Street, right down the street from Covenant House. And I didn't even know it was there, and I stayed once again, having to do things to survive, to get food, to get basic necessities, until one day an outreach worker found me and several other youth in that abandoned parking garage. And for me, Covenant House was the first place in years that I did not run from. And I was able to start to heal and start to learn healthy versus unhealthy, and start to feel genuine, unconditional love. And so that was a motivator for me to one day be able to give back in return, and what brought me back to Covenant House to work. And, as I did start off as a volunteer, but I found myself volunteering 5 days a week. So that, you might as well get paid. So, a work crisis for a little bit, but my heart and passion was for the youth that had similar backgrounds as myself, and youth that I knew that I could reach and connect with. And so now I'm the senior program manager for the Human Trafficking and Special Populations Department here at Covenant House.
Thank you, Sherry. So Catherine, I'd like to ask you the same question. What would you like for us to know about your story?
Okay, yeah, thank you so much. I'm glad to be here. I want to start out by, saying that I've learned that I was at risk myself. Really young, I grew up in a poor neighborhood, and I didn't like that. Like, I wanted to be with the other girls and carpool with the other kids, and my family just wasn't set up that way. My mom was very loving, supportive, and raised me and my sister alone. And when I got to be a teenager, I didn't see any more of that in a loving way. I wanted to live a different life, and I ran away a lot. I found myself looking for all the love in the wrong places. I looked for men that made me feel beautiful and had their own money at first. And I didn't, put together that they really needed me more than I needed them, and so yeah, when I was younger, I got trapped up in it, and I met this guy, and I thought that he was just a really nice guy, and he wanted to be my friend, and I was 15 years old and he was 35 years old. And that was like okay for me. Like that was like normal. I didn't really see anything wrong with it. I was running away a lot. So my family, they had looked for me. They had called the police looking for me quite a few times. And I would come back home, and I was allowed to come back home. My trafficker let me see my family. It was a very odd situation. And then I would go back and ultimately not be able to leave. I found myself in that situation until I was about 17 years old before I was able to get away from him, which wasn't I wasn't just allowed to leave. Obviously, my cousin found me and came and got me. And I learned the cycle of manipulation and abuse, and that kind of became my life, and I was very comfortable with it. And so I didn't go back home after she got me. I went back out to the street, and I went with another guy, and this was different. It was a different situation. There was other women there. I got involved with drugs, and we eventually got raided, and I got sent to jail. And I was put in a position where I was going to be going to trial, and I was raised through them not to say anything. And now I'm in trouble. Either way it goes, I'm either going to lose my life on the street, or I'm going to lose my life in prison forever. It was very difficult to deal with. And I also found myself living at Covenant House in Orlando. And they took me in and took care of me when I was 19 for a while. And through the jail situation, I got hooked up with an advocate, and they they didn't really notice that I was a minor at first, I could say. And when they did, they were like, okay, she needs some help and she should probably get away from this place. And they hooked me up with Eden House, where I learned I was trafficked. I had no idea. I was just kind of like, are you guys sure? Because I think I wanted to be there. And it took a lot of therapy and consistency, and I'm so glad that Eden House is a long-term program, because that's something that I needed. And through them, I learned that what happened to me wasn't okay, and that I am a survivor, and that just because my story doesn't sound like the movie Taken doesn't mean that I wasn't trafficked, and that doesn't hold weight either. So I love to be connected still to Eden House. I am compelled to, be with the other survivors and residents. I love being resident support, and working with them, and also being a part of groups and outreach, and trying to educate and give any perspective I can to anybody who wants to learn. And I'm very compelled to do that. I'm happy to do it here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Sherry, I have another question for you. How can we be survivor allies and carry forward survivor stories into the community?
I'm glad you asked that question.
with permission. So with permission. So because we understand the concept of carrying survivor stories, but make sure you have that survivor's permission to share their story, because it is their experience. And it can be very traumatizing to know that, you know, you're the discussion or topic at somebody's presentation, despite that it's, you know, coming from a good place. So, but I think survivors are best coming forward with their stories and using them in presentations or in trainings. They can speak best on their lived experience.
Thank you, Sherry.
Mhm.
Catherine, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think that it is important to ask and be sensitive. I think that those are definitely two things that need to be focused on as well. Sorry, I'm a little nervous tonight. It's been a while. Glad to be here. I think that the support and like the consistency of the support and keep showing back up for those survivors over and over again, because the trust, it's so hard to like learn or to give to anybody else, and so when somebody keeps showing up and asking, hey, do you want to do this, or do you want to be a part of this, it makes a big difference.
Thank you, Catherine. So to follow on that, Sherry, how can we learn from survivor stories and support survivor needs and recovery and prevention?
So, you know, coming from trauma-informed approach with victims and survivors, being sensitive and compassionate, not having to have that person retell their story over and over and over again to different service providers, just to receive services, because that can be a barrier for people to reach out to resources and community service providers. It's the fact that they tend to have to tell things that they may not necessarily be first and foremost prepared to share.
Thank you. Really appreciate your insight. And Catherine, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, can you repeat the question, please, for me?
Yeah, of course. How can we learn from survivor stories and support survivor needs for recovery and prevention?
Yeah, I think like swinging back to keeping in mind that there's so many different walks of human trafficking. There is a very large gray scale. There's also the black and white to it. And I think that keeping an open mind with all of that is super important.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Sherry, what is your vision for survivor leadership in the community?
I think survivor voices are very, very important in this fight of preventing human trafficking. And so, you know, Jennifer, I'm big on about these ideas, but I really see, you know, like if survivors were like number one for, you know, teaching more trainings and doing more awareness presenting and engagements in the community. If we included more of our youth survivors, our youth clients in some of these roundtables and also youth summits and bringing awareness, because, you know, I was just telling somebody today, young people don't listen to old people. They listen to young people, they listen to peers. And so if you've got more, you know, survivors involved, it's the same kind of concept. Survivors listen to you know, victims listen to survivors, or people at risk listen to survivors. They truly do. That's not to say that other people don't do incredible work. They do. It's just that connection, that like invisible bonds, kind of. I don't know how to explain it. Look, she's smiling. She knows.
Oh, that was beautiful. Catherine, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I think that it would be very important and helpful to have like survivor support groups amongst each other. There's a lot of confusing feelings sometimes that just feel wrong. And I think it's important to be able to have each other's back and say, you know, your feelings aren't wrong. They're valid. It might seem like that to the world that didn't live in it with us, but I think that would be like something really great to do and have. And I've been out here for a while, and I've heard of like different groups, but I've never seen or been in a group like that. And I think that like I could definitely even benefit from something like that. And I was talking to my therapist about it on Monday, about how I was feeling about, you know, reaching out back to traffickers after a certain amount of time, or feeling like I want to, or I care, and not feeling like I could tell the world that, because they're just gonna be like, why would you do that? And then, you know, so I think that it would be like really important and helpful to have supporting people who feel maybe not the same way, but can kind of understand.
I agree. I think that's very significant. So to add on, Ms. Sherry, what would be your vision for survivor services in this community?
In this community, if we had, my vision for survivor services would be, you know, like what we talked about, a multidisciplinary team across all ages. It minimizes that client having to retell their story, but it also gets everybody on the same page and as far as like needs and resources being met. Like Kevin said, support groups, more voice, more healing, a program that is really focused on unhealthy versus healthy. We take, I think, just, you know, kind of for granted that when somebody's out that situation, you don't understand the depth of what it takes to put yourself back together. Because it's not just the trafficker that, like, you know, kind of has fractured like your inner spirit, but it's societal norms, it's people's judgments and biases. And you have to, like, if you don't have the support, you're having to put all that back together by yourself. And that is a difficult challenge. It can take years, and it affects your life in so many different aspects. Not only just your mental health, we know now that mental health plays a huge role in physical health, emotional health, spiritual health. So, you know, my is to have as much support for victims and survivors as possible. Like, there's not enough needs that you can meet. There's not enough, you know, there's not too much you could do. And I think that everybody, kind of like the village, takes a village to raise a child. It takes everybody to kind of get on board and help heal that survivor. They have to do the hard work, but without support, that's a tremendous obstacle you're asking somebody to take on.
Thank you. So Catherine, I was wondering if you could add your vision, what you see for services.
Yeah, so I definitely think keeping a calm and safe mind requires a lot of work and consistency. I went through like about a year of not being connected and the falling back into my old habits. And, you know, we kind of thinking like, when am I going to be done with counseling? When am I going to stop talking about this? When am I going to stop seeing somebody every week to keep ultimately bringing back talking about the same thing? And I've kind of came to like the conclusion that, you know, I've like need to normalize for myself that, you know, normalizing counseling, I might be in counseling forever. I might, you know, I'm gonna need the support forever. I'm gonna need like something strong behind me for the rest of my life. I'm gonna think about it. It gets easier. It can be easier sometimes than other times, but just like, you know, normalizing support and, you know, because it could be a lot when you're like telling someone, hey, you're gonna have to go to counseling forever. You know what I mean? I didn't want to hear that when I feel like I was like, when is this gonna be over? So I think like my vision is like trying to like normalizing like the help maybe for a while. It would be nice to see people try to take it in better.
Thank you. So Sherry, what I'd like to ask you is kind of as a segue point before we move to Jennifer Best is to really talk about it, Covenant House. I feel we've touched on it, you know, in your responses so far, but, you know, how have you built the program at Covenant House, and what would you like to share as far as what you see as a best practice and what you'd like the community to know about what Covenant House is doing to address human trafficking?
Yeah, so, I mean, basic is that Covenant House Youth Homeless Shelter. When we started this program, our shelter focuses on a very specific age range, 16 to 22. And one of the things that I was running into were younger than 16 and older than 22, having this experience, but still having nowhere to go. Maybe the adult shelters were full, maybe they didn't feel safe there, you know, maybe foster care couldn't come, you know, that wasn't the appropriate placement at that time. And so part of the program is what we modeled it to where we will accept outside of that age range on an emergency basis until we can place them in an appropriate setting so that they're not returning back to the street or their abusers, their traffickers. So we've served as young as 11 and as old as 54. In the sense though that because a lot of people, when they think of human trafficking, think of a specific age range, but that should tell you that, you know, it can happen to anybody at any age due to any vulnerability that they may have. So we've built that program on trying to provide services so that we provide immediacy to any victim of trafficking and then worry about the long-term placement later. That's been very important. Our focus also has been on underserved populations, which is, you know, our male population that are less likely to identify or report. Trans people, populated, like, because LGBTQ, there's still a lot of discrimination. It leaves them very vulnerable to being exploited. So we've kind of just modeled around that. And again, I push constantly for us to have a more survivor-centered with their voices, where, you know, we can get them to a place where they're healthy enough to you know, to advocate or to begin that advocacy, share their story if they choose to. Because let me tell you, I'm 47, I think I made this 47, I mean, and I still can get triggered at any time. I could be fine, you know, telling my story one moment, and then the next moment, there's just something that catches, you know, triggers my brain, and I'm breaking down, you know. So I think, so, but having that support, right, and that's being in a healthy state where, you know, you've gone through that. It's just it's a very emotional And so that's kind of where we're at as far as program wise, and age range, and just trying to be an immediate safe haven for people that are outside our youth age group, you know, and working with other people to place them in more appropriate settings.
Thank you. So I'm going to segue to Jennifer Best. So Jennifer, can you talk about Eden House's mission and the services that you provide?
Sure. Thanks for the invite. I'll be happy to. My name is Jennifer Best, and I work at Eden House, New Orleans. And our mission is to eradicate the trafficking, and selling of human beings. We do that in a lot of different ways. We try to create systemic change through youth prevention, education. We work through legislative advocacy, and then we have recovery and reentry services, which is a lot of people that have heard of Eden House, excuse me, they normally think of our recovery home. So we got a lot of different things going on, but my job is direct residential support with our residents. And so our residential program is a 2-year long program. It's for adult women. We have adults only. And, you know, we are hoping to provide a safe place for these survivors to come and rest, to be able to reset. We kind of have phases, but we don't, you know, the first, you know, day 0 or day 1 to 90 is a little bit more restricted. And then, you know, that's where they're doing intense, you know, drug treatment, IOP. We get them connected with a trauma therapist. So they're looking inward a lot in the first 3 to 6 months. And then once they are kind of further along in their program, then we open it up to if they want to seek out education, if they want to go back to school, we help provide that. If they want to do some job search, we hope to provide that as well. As far as our program in-house goes, we run a lot of different groups, and we're constantly adding groups. We have anger management, we talk about relationships, we've got trauma processing groups. We do life skills where we learn how to budget and try to stick to the budget. We just do a lot of different things. But again, like they're coming in and we hope to provide just a chance to reset. So yeah, that's a little bit of what we do. We also are hopefully within the next year, going to be opening up an emergency safe house. Over the years, we have learned that, you know, Eden House, the residential side is really a little bit more stable, and realizing that, you know, someone that is just coming out of the life needs an emergency shelter. And so that's in the works. So hopefully within a year.
Yes, fingers crossed.
Yes.
So let me ask you, how did you become passionate about this issue?
Sure. So when I was in grad school, I worked with an organization that would reach out to some women on Bourbon Street. And I got to know some of the women there. And I found out that, you know, a lot of the women choose, you know, to work in that industry. But then I also found out that some didn't. And so I was really curious about those who were forced. And so I just started researching. I started, you know, learning more about the topic of human trafficking. That was around the time also, I'm going to refer back to the Taken movie that back in 2009, 2010. And so that was really my general idea of what human trafficking was. So I started researching and realizing, oh my goodness, it's in our city, it's in our town, it's everywhere. So yeah, you know, learning more and more about it, it just kind of fueled my direction in my career, where I really wanted to learn more about trauma-informed care. And yeah.
Thank you. So following on that, we understand that human trafficking occurs everywhere, including New Orleans. Can you talk about what trafficking looks like in the city of New Orleans?
Yeah, I mean, do I?
It's not Taken. It's not like the movie
Yeah,
Taken.
absolutely, it's not Taken. You know, I was just looking at some numbers today. I knew, you know, this was coming up today. And so I was looking at the newly report, the DCFS report that came out for 2021. And in Louisiana alone, there were 759 confirmed cases. Now I will say it's underreported. I have my assumptions of why it's underreported, but it doesn't matter. That's almost 800 cases. Out of those, so there's 64 parishes in Louisiana, and there were only 6 that didn't have any reports. So 58 parishes are reporting, you know, cases here. In Orleans alone, there was 112. 16 were 18 years and older, and 106 were 17 and under. Again, I think that that's underreported. I think that the numbers, there are tons more out there. It just hasn't been, whether that's COVID or hurricane, I don't know. So it's here, you know, and it looks different than Taken. A lot of people know who they're connected with the trafficker, whether it be family or boyfriends. I think we heard from Kat earlier, you know, was a intimate partner. So did that answer your question?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
So let's follow up on that. And who, in your opinion, is doing trafficking, and can it happen to anyone?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it can happen to anyone. I think there are things that might put us more at risk than others, such as support, or, you know, survivors mentioned the support around them. But I think it can happen to anyone. It has. I mean, there's, you know, male, female, LGBTQIA, adults, children. It is happening to anyone. You know, and what was the second part of your question?
Who is doing the trafficking? Who's
Like the traffickers?
Yeah, who are they? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like I mentioned earlier, it really, you know, family. There's the family connections, there's intimate partner connections, boyfriends. There also could be a stranger there. It can be like Taken. We don't see that often, but men, women, grandparents, you know, it really doesn't, we can't just say, this is who it is, and let's look out for this person. It is really anybody. It can look like anybody.
So let me ask you, how can we support organizations like Eden House, who's working to stop trafficking and to support recovery and wellness for survivors?
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways that you can help support us. Of course, there's always going to be the monetary. We're always looking for more money. We are a nonprofit, and so we're always looking for grants and stuff to write. Time, you know, giving of your time. We have 2 homes, and we'll have another emergency safe house. And so the upkeep, we have volunteer groups that come in and work in our garden or pressure wash the house. We also have an Amazon wish list, so you could, you know, help donate some of that. I think one of our biggest needs right now is feminine products. So having like a drive or something like that would be very helpful for our women. So yeah.
Thank you. Sherry, I'm going to ask you the same question. How can we support Covenant House? You're on mute.
Pretty much the same. You know, we love volunteers over here. We need them. Even if it's just to sort through our clothing room, you know, or work our crisis line, assist with some direct care. Money is always good. This month, you know, they've done an Amazon wish list for Covenant House, I think, as well as Eating House, and all of those things that people have been donating, purchasing, and sending our way, hairspray, makeup, slippers, robes, so all of that makes a difference just to their self-esteem and you know, starts to make them feel better. So that's really, really nice. And I know that the clients really appreciate those small items. They, you know, kind of take for granted. The hairspray can be a big deal.
Yeah. So I'm keeping an eye on the time. So what I thought I would do is, before we move to Q&A, is kind of go back to each of you and see if there's anything that you want to add that I didn't ask you that you were thinking of as we went through this panel. So Catherine, I'm going to start with you. See if there's anything you want to add. You're on mute, Catherine.
Sorry, I think I'm ready for questions.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you. Sherry, was there anything that you want to add that didn't think to ask you?
No, I just want to thank everybody for, you know, plugging in tonight and to learn more about trafficking and how we can help.
Thank you. Jennifer?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay. So I guess we'll move to questions and answers.
Hi, everyone. My name is Melissa. I'm one of the co-chairs, co-vice chair, excuse me, for the ABOLISH Committee with Junior League. And we have quite a few questions being added to the chat. One of the things that was mentioned earlier on was survivor care. And so how do you think survivors influence the development or advancement of survivor care?
Sherry, do you want to take that or?
Sure. I think that like when you have lived experience, you're able to reach a level of compassion and sensitivity. You know, not everything that person is feeling or going through, but you sure can empathize with them. You also know like how to, I think, avoid certain things that will trigger that client. You know that there's trust that has to be built before you can, you know, put any expectations or try to learn their story or, you know, and there's that boundaries because you know how it feels when other people put you in an uncomfortable situation. So you know to avoid that with other survivors.
Thank you. Jennifer, I felt like you had something that you wanted to add too, so.
I was actually reading the comments,
Oh.
so I can respond to something later. Yeah. But I agree with Sherry. Absolutely. There is a different, I can throw out these numbers, but it is fantastic to have when a survivor is empowered to share their story. It just takes it to a different level. And I don't know what Kat may need or, you know, what other, you know, they can bring more knowledge in that experience for sure.
Catherine, did you want to add to that?
No, thank you.
Okay.
Another question that we had. So, and this was directed to Catherine. Were there, like in hindsight, were there any like red flags that, you know, you were thinking about and it's like, oh wait, this is kind of the situation that I'm being trafficked and, you know, was some, you know, were these flags that if sharing could help others maybe be more aware?
I think definitely thinking back on it now, there was a lot of red flags. One of the main red flags could have been like a dramatic age difference, and just kind of the age difference, the isolation that started happening between my family, the abuse that started happening around me first and not just to me, definitely happened into red flags. The perfect script is a red flag that I've met a lot of women my age. I'm 24 here that, you know, always are like, hey, I met this guy, he says everything, this, and that. And I'm just like, hey, like, you know, maybe you should take a second look at that. My grandfather always says, if it's too good to be true, it probably is.
And talking about like with the experiences, Sherry, you mentioned that you consistently ran away, but what was it about Covenant House that made you kind of stay and made you feel safe enough to stay?
Yeah, I think just the fact that I had a lot of voids in my life and a lot of wants, and you know, and having so many different needs that needed to be met. You know, coming into Covenant House, being around other residents that were, you know, had gone through similar things, or were feeling that same void, unlovable, unwanted, abandoned, those sort of things. You know, here that when I walked in, I'm speaking myself, when I walked in, it was so many different staff that played such a different role, you know, in your life, that took the time to like show me things or teach me new things, or, you know, didn't discard me because I had made one mistake. Maybe I said the F word too many times or something. They, you know, they were compassionate to helping me to heal, you know. And so the biggest thing growing up that I missed and yearned for was family. And so I think that's what I found when I walked in Covenant House as a youth, was that sense of family.
Jennifer, one of our participants asked if you could repeat the statistics that you presented, and maybe give a little more info on St. Tammany Parish. We have a few listeners on the North, or participants in the North Shore.
Sure. Yeah, and I can put it in the comments in a minute, but it's the Louisiana, the DCFS. They do an annual trafficking report every year. But so 759 confirmed human trafficking victims were reported last year. This is just Louisiana. Out of the 64 parishes, there were only 6 that had 0 cases. 712 were sex trafficking cases, 7 were labor, and 9 were both. So in Orleans Parish, there were 112 cases that were reported. Out of the 112, 16 were 18 years and older, and then 106 were 17 and under. And then in St. Tammany, so if you pull this, it has all of the information. If you pull the report, it's got all of the 64 parishes. But in St. Tammany, there was 1 18 and older reported, and 8 17 and under, and then 1 was the age unknown. So when I say it's happening everywhere, it really is. Like, we moved away from New Orleans, moved to a very tiny town in Mississippi, like this big, like 1 red light, and it was there. So when your eyes are open to it, when you learn, when you're more aware of your surroundings, what's going on, picking up the signs, you'll know, you'll see it. It's everywhere.
And then, Catherine, you mentioned the impact to your family's socioeconomic situation. In retrospect, if there was there anything about your childhood, in addition, that if it was different, would it have led to a different outcome?
Maybe my mother was on a lot of antidepressant medication. She slept a lot. Very loving woman, but she, was sleeping a lot or like in her room. So I wasn't watched a lot. And I didn't have any other like family around me for a long time until I did move back to Florida. And so I guess the lack of like having that family around or anybody that I could feel like I could go talk to and be like, hey, there's this person in my life and this is what I think about him. Like, what do you think about them? Like, I didn't really have that to go back to and want to tell anybody because I didn't really feel like anybody was there to care, or I was just in so much trouble all the time that nobody like really wanted to hear it. So I definitely think that if there was more support that way, maybe it could have opened their eyes and maybe my eyes are as well. But at the same time, I might have not listened. I mean, I probably wouldn't have listened at all. And but just if they tried, or they knew to try, would have probably had some kind of impact.
Thank you. And then I want to close out. We started our Q&A talking about how survivors might influence the development of care and support. But how can we as individuals make sure that we are giving y'all the support that the support exists that you need?
You can take this one, Sherry.
I was waiting on you.
Like in general.
Yeah, in general, like I think, like just as I said, it takes really an entire community's involvement if you're really going to prevent human trafficking, make people aware of human trafficking, and have a strong fight against human trafficking. Because you need your community to push lawmakers. You need your community to, financially and physically support nonprofits and also other service providers. You need resources. You need people to influence, like government officials, not to cut this, to reinstate this, or this is what is needed. You need teachers to like also assist with like doing a lot of prevention work in schools where we see that. You need people that influence on social media. So it's like just community involvement, get involved.
Yeah, I agree that bringing back to like when you said time, that time that you can just take out of your day to come do an activity or just to talk or, there's so many different groups that anybody can be good at anything and come and bring it to us and do something with us. It could be dancing, it could be singing, it could be a dodgeball game, it could be something that doesn't have to do with trafficking. It could be anything, just bringing out that time and taking it with us.
Thank y'all so much thank you again so much for our speakers and attendees for joining us. And a special thank you to our Abolish committee who's been working behind the scenes to make tonight possible. We are partnering with Eden House and Covenant House on a donation drive to help support victims with items needed. So please look for the link to donate items via Amazon at jlno.org. And I just put in the chat right now the link to the Abolish page, which does have those links set up. There are also several resources in Louisiana to provide more information for human trafficking, as well as the number for the National Human Trafficking Hotline. So thank you all again so much for joining us for tonight's discussion.
Thank you.